So the central question of this lecture is, what does democracy mean today in the digital transformation? And today we will venture a look at a very specific domain to this question that goes beyond the intersections of the scientific stuff or academic stuff that you were probably mostly talking about in the last session. So it goes beyond this intersection of political science, law, and STS, and highlights the applied social science and the digital activism side of this digital transformation and democracy topic. And today we will learn about the industries that influence political opinion on the grounds of the data they are collecting and using. And before I introduce my dear guest, Amber McIntyre, in a moment, hi Amber, I'd like to say a few words about the framing of today's topic. So especially now with Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, the influence of social media on political behavior of its users and beyond is once again a hot topic of discussion. Take, for example, the much discussed unblocking of Donald Trump's account and other blocked accounts one day before the American midterms. But the position of social media towards insurgents in authoritarian regimes, such as in Iran, in particular, is also becoming increasingly conspicuous, especially when social media providers are accused of breaking local laws with their algorithms or even supporting the insurgents. So the last few years have shown in particular how much such social media platforms with diverse marketing business models have already inscribed in their architecture the build-up and expansion of attention, especially through so-called strong content, which is like hate speech. And this kind of abusive behavior get much more attention. Shock moments or violence, they work much better than little kittens nowadays, unfortunately. So these algorithms are also exploited by the so-called campaigners of political content. But what does exploit mean, right? Many of these algorithms come from the social science insights of how to influence opinions, as we find in both commercial and political marketing since the mid-20th century latest. There was a lot of that before that as well, and long before the digital transformation took place at all. So these algorithms are at the core of the influence industries, composed of data brokers, content delivery platforms, advertisers, mobile phone companies, and many, many more, who are all in the targeting business, based on the data collected across social domains, not only on social media. So in the forthcoming talk, we will hear about how the civil society research NGO Tactical Tech has carried out unique investigations to document 500 companies in these industries and their practices of profiling, segmenting, and targeting audiences for specific contents, framing, and formats. And to cite from the report, despite widespread global attention, there is still very little known about the techniques that are applied to sway citizens' political views by leveraging the data they give away. So once again, welcome Amber McIntyre from Tactical Tech. So just to introduce you briefly, Amber, you completed your PhD at Royal Holloway University of London in Politics and International Relations. And before that, you completed a Master's in International Law and the Settlement of Disputes at the University for Peace in Costa Rica. You previously worked at Amnesty International in several different teams, including digital communications, campaigns, and governance. And since 2017, you lead the project at Tactical Tech, an international NGO that investigates and mitigates the impact of digital technology on society based in Berlin. Tactical Tech's vision is a world where digital technologies where digital technologies can contribute to a more equitable, democratic, and sustainable society. A view that I like very much, because you can easily be critical, but it's also important to be on the productive side of things and then also find solutions for the critique that happened. And to enable this change, you not only investigate, but you also create practical solutions, as I said, which are there for citizens and civil society actors. For me, especially very interesting is the wide range of open educational resources that you offer and share via the web that everybody of you can see and use. And I will share the link in a bit when I stop talking. And many of those tools I have already used myself in teaching, and it worked perfectly. You know, for example, Trachography. They are very intuitive, and when you guys try out the link that I will send into the chat, you will see afterwards. Me and My Shadow, a really cool guide for out navigating annoying trackers and more, or the very famous by now Data Detox Kit, which is like a guideline how to in 8 days learn to get more control or regain control on your data body. So really beautiful stuff you're having there. And not only are your materials very user-friendly, they are also on top open source. So you're allowing your users to replicate them and even to contribute to their functions, which I think is also very innovative and not always happening. So as a small-scale organization, you probably often have to rely on collaborations, but also not only for like producing new innovative new innovative products, but you're also heavily depending on funding you get. So maybe afterwards in the chat or in the Q&A, we can a little bit discuss also the sustainability of your endeavors and how you probably also struggle to do all what you do, all these wonderful things, and how in a world today those really important research workflows, but also insights that you create for public interest can be maintained on that high level and that high quality. But now enough. I can talk for hours about how happy I am that you are here. Amber, please tell us more about your work and your recent report. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's always, I love these intros. Someone else introduces me. I'm like, wow, they sound really interesting. So I always like to hear about myself from someone else. And actually also the start of the slides were about tactical tech, but I think you covered it very nicely. So thank you for that warm welcome. And yeah, I think it's really a pleasure to talk about it and to talk about it to different groups. I mean, I think one of the things about working in NGOs, we also regularly, and a research NGOs, we regularly have to work across different disciplines. So we have to work with NGOs and we have to work with academics and find ways to work with policymakers. And so it's really nice to be, again, with for me to have like a route back into the academic space. And what I'm going to try and cover in this time is a little bit about like our research approach and how we decided to tackle the questions. And I'm going to look at that through looking at the role of industry in political influence, ways of understanding political influence itself, and especially we've always framed it through data-driven methods, so different ways personal data is used in political influence, and a little touch on research methods, but maybe they get also discussed in the questions at the end. Yeah, a short intro to tactical tech, which Katja already did very nicely, but we have a few different projects which all look at, like they're quite varied from each other, and but they all aim to tackle how technology, helping people understand how technology impacts their life politically and socially. And we have two different specific projects which particularly do this through art objects, which is the Glassroom and What the Future Wants. And the Glassroom takes like public spaces and turns them into art galleries or spaces that are easily accessible and turns them into art galleries around the topic of tech. And we have pop-up versions of it that can be, yeah, popped up anywhere. And then we have also for like people to guide themselves through online, the Data Detox Kit and a Digital Inquirer Kit. One of them is about detoxing yourself and your data. And so trying to find ways to turn off your location, keep your phone at home, these sorts of aspects. And the Digital Inquirer Kit is about how to investigate, like how a citizen can investigate and fact check and go about, citizen investigations. And then we have two professional facing projects. And by professional facing, I mean, which are much more for people who are already researchers, people who might be journalists or investigators. And one of them is Exposing the Invisible, which I think Tracography is from, which helps investigators understand what sort of open source tools can be used to conduct investigations. And then the Influence Industry Project, which I am going to, there's some pictures from all three of those, and the Influence Industry Project, which I'm going to talk through in this lecture. And the Influence Industry Project's been going for 5 years now. I don't know if that's in the way in here. It's hard to see what you can see. But so it's a 5-year project at the moment. And the first 3 years were particularly research-based, and the last 2 years we've started trying to outreach that research through different products, and I'll share them at the end. And what we wanted to do was to go beyond a lot of what we saw with standard coverage of data and elections. So we wanted to go beyond Facebook and platforms. I mean, particularly at this time in 2017, 2018, Cambridge Analytica and Facebook were both at the highlight, and we'd started this project just slightly before the Cambridge Analytica scandal hit. But just as a quick summary, in case you don't know the story, then Cambridge Analytica were using data that they had acquired nefariously, debatably illegally, and then it was found to be illegal, but it took quite a while to get there, that they had acquired from Facebook, and then sold that data, and then again, allegedly, and then over time, proved or not proved to different parties in contentious campaigns, such as in Brexit campaign in the UK or in the Trump campaign in the US. Cambridge Analytica were working in the US and the UK, but they were also working in, at that time, 17 other countries, if they weren't at least their parent company were. So Facebook was getting a lot of press because of this, and then went under investigation from the UK and the US government. Cambridge Analytica went bust, and the USA and the UK have, like at this time in 2018, a lot of coverage on how personal data was being used in elections. But a lot of it was routine. I think Alexander Nix, who was the director of Cambridge Analytica, said himself when he was interrogated, he said, what we're doing is routine practice for this industry. And what we wanted to do was to conduct research to show how it was routine practice. These tools are routine, and also that it's an industry. And so that is, Facebook isn't the only actor in this field, and neither is Cambridge Analytica, and that it's happening across the world, and that understanding its nuance across the world is important to understanding the types of ethics we discuss around it and its impact and its democratic impact. And so to do that, we conducted research in-house, but we also had 17 different partnerships of experts in different countries, and these experts could vary quite a lot. So some of them are NGOs like Tactical Tech, who are investigating topic in this space. Some of them were journalists, and some were lawyers, and some were academics. And across those countries, we investigated 12 different tools. So beyond Facebook, we created a guidebook called Personal Data, Political Persuasion, and we looked at search engine optimization, campaign apps, social listening, and I'm going to go into all of this in a little bit more detail. And then we also, as was mentioned, and most recently released product displaying this, was to investigate what companies are working in this space. Who are the political consultants? Who are the private firms? Who are the data brokers? And we had a list of 500 companies, which is also the bit that I've worked on the most. I'm most excited to talk about it, and that I will share a little bit more at the end of the presentation. There we go. So I wanted to just do a brief introduction to the topic. I think, as I understand from a little briefly, that people in joining the lecture, you might all be in slightly different courses and topics to each other. And so I wanted to just start with like a short introduction into also my journey into this space, which was to really be looking at how people communicate themselves. So if any of you want to already guess what these are in the chat, I don't know how interactive you usually do these things, but feel free to comment if you know what these logos are. But these are the logos or symbols, I don't know if logos right word here, but the logos of the political parties in the UK. And as you can see, we have a red rose, which is particularly important to British symbolism. We have a green tree, which is used for the Conservative Party, which they use to symbolize growth. We have this purple and yellow pound sign, which is for UKIP, who are somewhat right-wing party. And this purple and yellow is also used in a popular, very cheap house, like, what's the word? A shop for everything you could possibly need, basically, like a Poundland or Euro store. That by positioning themselves like this, they've got the pound sign for something that's national view, like that shows something nationalist, but also this color scheme, which is associated with affordable. And so I start with this because then we can also move on to some other examples. Again, I'm using some from the UK, and we're going to go through a few from other countries too. But the UK is what I know best. We have the Conservative Party and Labour from the UK at their political party conferences, and they've got all of this color up, and they have their symbol behind them. And this is the point that I think is particularly useful here, is that as soon as television appeared, political party conferences, which were happening every year, as soon as television was recording them and color television existed, the political parties started choosing their branding and changing how they communicated based on what the technology would see. And so as data-driven tools appeared, this also happens to change the types of ways they're trying to present themselves and how they're going to be seen, and therefore how they change how they're seen. And so, I mean, the summary of bringing that together is politicians are thinking about how they're perceived, how they symbolize who they want to be, how they want to be seen all the time. And so they're thinking about, how do they seem like a good person, or how do they seem like a good politician? How do they look? And this way, not just in their actions, but like how they actually look in terms of the colors and what they're wearing and who they're talking to. And what does that mean about who they are, and would make them more likely to be voted for or trusted? And technology has constantly changed this. And so, as like slight homework that for all of you, like in any of your spare time, where do you see politicians? Like, where do you physically see them? And I think if you can start to answer that question for yourself, you can also start to see it much more how influence works, because what we're talking about here is how do we then become influenced? And it's really about this physical moment in which you actually hear something or actually see something. And so, as a list of some of the tools in which you might see politicians, you might see them, social media, on television, radio, celebrity endorsements, newspapers, through journalist interviews, through their websites, door-to-door rally and events, billboards. These are some of the examples of where you might see them. And you can see how there's some research. I'm not going to talk through this, but if you wanted to learn more, and I'll share the slides. This is some research done by different groups who have kind of shown how there's been a change in the types of techniques used to influence people based on what technology is available. So that's the starting point for then to understand, well, if data-driven technology is available, how does political influence change, and what tools are politicians using? Again, staying in the space of just introducing the topic, I wanted to quickly talk about what is personal data, because this is really core to how we understand data-driven and technology-driven political influence. So personal data is a database readable representation of a person or persons, such as their demographics, behaviors, or attitudes. Data can be collected directly if you sign up to something and you fill in a form. It could be done indirectly, like you have an app on your phone that's also connected to your location and connected to your friends lists, or connected to your social media, so one can start to indirectly gather data through another. And it can also be inferred, and this is particularly important to something we'll look at it in a minute, which is that we could decide something is true about someone, not because we've collected, for example, their gender and age from a form, and then we have some of the apps that they've downloaded, and then we can say, okay, well, we could probably think this person is like someone who's likely to go out on a Friday night, or is likely to purchase a lot on in a big shopping market rather than smaller stores. So you can start to make assumptions of you based on the data there. And yeah, and I think the other thing that's important here is that data can really mean a lot of different things. It can be your contact details, DNA, personality traits, actions you've taken, political actions, the TV or news you watch, financial interactions, ethnicity and gender, and your network and friends. And all of this forms your data shadow. And so this is like, if the first core element we had was political communications is into this topic, the second core element is all of this data that can be collected and what does it mean to have personal data in existence, but also generated about us. And we break down how this can be used in data-driven political communications through 3 different moments, like in the data journey. And I'm going to go through, this is going to formulate or form the basis of the rest of the presentation's framework, which is that the first data is collected and can be used as an asset. So just by collecting and owning data about people, political parties have a sort of an asset, and they can also sell that data on, or they can use it in different ways. So one part of their process is to collect data. The second part is that they can use data as intelligence, and that is that they can profile people, and they can also see what people are reading and what people are watching, and they can learn a lot. So this way they analyze the data and they have this proof of intelligence, or they have, like, in this way that intelligence is their knowledge or the facts that they have in their hands. And finally, data is used as influence, and that is for a message, like where you see the message. It's data-driven tools like WhatsApp, Facebook, search engines, campaign apps, so all of these spaces in which we actually receive the message. And so this is how we're going to look at data-driven influence by political parties. But importantly, as is in the title and in the introduction to this, it's not just by political parties. And so the final sort of intro slide I have is that we're not just understanding that political parties communicate to citizens, and also this slide refers, like, also not just citizens to political parties. We also understand that there's the role of literal mediators and through the media, such as journalists or newspapers. That then the introduction of social media meant that political parties could actually sidestep journalists, which allowed them a little bit more freedom to present themselves how they wanted, and when I say how they wanted, now we also understand it as like how the political party would like to present themselves in the format that a platform like Facebook or Twitter allows them, and also how, and while still also engaging with traditional media. And finally, and what's important to the research we've done at Tactical Tech and to this presentation, is the role of the influence industry, which are private firms which control how political parties engage with media, or how they engage with social media. So a private firm, and as we'll go into more detail, but a private firm might work for the political party. They might be an advertising firm or a PR firm or a campaign consultant, and they'll tell them, okay, well, this is what the people want. We've decided this is what the people want from the research we've done. This is how you should use media to translate to them or to communicate to them. And this is how you should use social media. They might even own or control the social media themselves, this private firm in the influence industry. And so any theories in political theory that you might come with, and a lot of the theories from older political theory are based, even when media exists, a lot of the theory is still based on the role political parties have with citizens, and very little have currently got a theory of how or what the role of these private firms and third-party firms should be. So we started this research, and then to take a step back to the research process, we started this research 5 years ago, and I was actually just brought in to start with at Tactical Tech for a few days a week, looking at a few of the companies. So they had a list of the team already working on it, had a list of maybe 8 or 9 companies, and they wanted me to create sort of short dossiers, and I created short dossiers in each company. And I'm going to talk through some of those dossiers now, but I'm going to do each in relation to these areas of data as asset, data as intelligence, and data as influence. So coming back to what is data as an asset, as I said, it's the data that's collected, it's data that's hosted, it's data that's valuable. And this data can come in the form of voter files in which the political party already hosts information. So this could be the political party have saved data on people they've talked to door to door, people they know living in a neighborhood, but also a lot of the time, most national governments across the world sell or give out for free or make available in some way a voter file where whoever the political parties can see who is living in a certain area and who can vote in that area and where they're eligible to vote. And I mean, this is the availability can really change. In some countries, it's just given for free. In the UK, you have to sign up to get it, but anyone with a business address or political party group could sign up to get it. You just have to write to your local authority. And then this can be hosted in a customer relationship management system, a CRM. And so this is what the political party will keep. Some of them are using Excel spreadsheets. Some of them are using more substantial databases like CRMs. And in this, they have the name, they have all of this information from the voter file, but they can also append this with other data, such as that they've purchased from data brokers. And some of the biggest data brokers, and we might have a look at these at the end, are, for example, Experian and Axiom. And both, yeah, can sell them data on like what are people's interests and habits, what was their voting history, and yeah, I think I've got them here. So Axiom, as I mentioned, they can sell your information also on location-based device data, then app usage and installation, Bluetooth connections, location data, and they can also, as they write in the bottom, semantic audiences, a custom approach to define audience segments with keyword groupings. So the type of content and the topics of the content, and also maybe the emotions behind the type of content. These are all types of data that Axiom can sell to political parties, which they will have collected through various means, like either purchasing it themselves from other private firms or through scraping public data on a regular basis. You also have other companies that work in this space that we looked at are companies like Conservative Connector. Conservative Connector is an award-winning company, as is written here, an award-winning company that provides clients with access to conservative activists and donors through renting email lists. And so it's actually an American company. So it's also referring to Republican candidates and Republican groups. And they sell, they collect data lists from their clients and then sell those same data lists to the other clients. So they connect conservative email lists. I think what's really important in also understanding the types of firms and how it works in the realm of data as an asset, like where the political parties are collecting data from. There's some really interesting aspects of like the, I was trying to work out what to call it with a colleague today, but like the dark market or the black market, the dark side of the industry, which not all of this is actually, I think maybe we'll talk about that more in a second, but one thing that we're trying to understand their role is phone companies. So in Kenya, Nigeria, and in Zimbabwe, and as I just recently learned, also in Ukraine and in Georgia, there are examples of telecom companies selling data to, or not even selling, perhaps just providing data to the government, and therefore the political party currently in charge, so that mass text can be sent out to individuals on voting day or the week before voting day to support the current candidate who's also currently in power. Yeah, so I think the telecom companies is the only bit I'll pull out there because I think that it's a slightly outside of like the influence industry, but they're still working with governments to provide them with data as an asset. And the other area, and this is the dark side that we were discussing today, was them is more about leaks, breaches, and hacks. And there's some really, there's definitely like a market in which people are earning money and also making contacts and making networks by finding data leaks and selling them on. And I think actually this was the example from Ukraine that came out, which we have the research published on. I can share the links later, where there's a bot which you can offer data towards, and then once you offer data towards it, you can also then ask for a name and it will provide data back, such as their email address or home address. If you look up leaks and breaches of political data in pretty much any country, like I when I started this, I was thinking, okay, here are a few examples, and after writing 4 examples, it's like, oh no, I just think this is something that happens everywhere. But that's another way that political parties end up with the data, because once it's out there, it is out there. And just a small touch on how we might investigate this space. And we've worked with a couple of people who are doing freedom of information requests. We haven't done GDPR requests yet, but we plan to. And the work that I've done the most and what we just saw was going to the websites and also like the YouTube channels of the companies such as Axiom or Conservative Connector, and finding out the sorts of things that they boast. A GDPR request is similar to a freedom of information request. So like to be able to claim that you can, to claim to a company that you would like information on who you, on what they hold on you based on your rights under GDPR. I guess in a type of freedom of information request. And so that was data as an asset. Now we have data as intelligence. And so this is how data is used to, for the political parties to know something about you, and again, using private firms to get there. And I'd like to separate this into 2 different areas. The first one is how they profile themselves. So this is how they can understand, this isn't how they profile who's coming to their website, but how they profile the success of their website, such as through Google Analytics, social media metrics, or A/B testing. And they use this to understand questions like, how successful are we? Is our messaging and tone right? What images and colors encourage different engagements? And so this is an example again from the UK, but then you can this is using the tool actually Who Targets Me, and Who Targets Me now works European wide. I think they might work internationally, but definitely European wide, which allows people to offer their data for free. Like, for example, for me to sign up and say that Who Targets Me can collect what adverts I'm receiving for researchers to use. And through this, they found that the Liberal Democrats in the UK were using at least 15 different images to try and advertise their political party in the run up to an election. And then this data is all, this isn't the data the political party have, but the data that the Who Targets Me has, which shows like how many women saw this advert in what age group. And then based on the data that the party would have received, they chose which ones to go ahead with, and they ended up going ahead with. So this is like a form of A/B testing, where you see, they go from 15 images, test how successful they are, which ones are the most successful, and narrow that down to 5 images. And the types of companies that we've researched that help political parties do this include, I think I lost the names next to these. I think they must be in white on white here. But the company on one side optimize every aspect of your communication, have at the bottom, for example, say you can fine tune your materials, and they write, apparently minuscule differences in headlines, subheads, copy tone, layouts, and images can make a massive and surprising difference to performance. And so they explain how they can help further in their website, how they can help you test your headlines, test your copy tone, your layouts, your images, your colors. As examples can also include like changing the donate button size to from blue to pink, from slightly bigger to slightly smaller, to see what gets people to click on the most. And then again, ampersand, the business in green, also explains something like this. Did my campaign run? What was the reach and frequency? Did I achieve what I wanted to achieve? And so they help measure these are the types of companies helping political parties measure how successful their websites are. And you can investigate this by comparing, as with Who Targets Me, either using Who Targets Me or also in Facebook ad libraries. You can compare how many images were put by one party, and you can see some information about who saw those adverts. And you can also use cookie tracking tools to see what sort of analytics people have on their website. So I can also try and make sure there's a link to that in the slides, but there's tools you can go, if you also just search for it online, you can find these tools which can help you see what cookies a website is using. And then you can see whether they have, for example, Google Analytics or a social media firm's analytics to understand how you're being tracked by these websites. That was how they use intelligence to profile themselves. Then we have intelligence to profile voters. And so there's different ways that voters can be profiled. The most infamous in terms of media coverage already is psychometric profiling, which is the type that Cambridge Analytica used. And I can just recommend a tool that we made called the Ocean tool, ocean.tacticaltech.org, which takes you through a psychometric test, and you can see what type of political advert you would receive at the end of it. It's very basic, but it shows the point. And so this is the type of profiling where people can, what type of personality you have. You can also have demographic profiling, which can be collected from census data, such as your gender, your location, your age. You can have behavioral profiling, which would be collected from your analytics and location tracking, like what are you doing? How are you using the website? It could be just how you behave with the political party. Have you clicked on their website? Have you donated? Have you turned up to rallies? But it can also be broader, like, do you go shopping regularly? Do you drive a car? Do you go past a school often? Does it seem like you might have kids? Like this behavioral information can be very broad. And then there's opinion profiling, which would be based on social listening or focus groups or polls. Very common also in academic research to do this type of profiling on groups, like what type of opinion do people have, what topics are they interested in, and how do they feel about those topics. And some of the companies doing this that I think were particularly interesting, Haystack DNA, who are a US company. I think they might be Partisan, but we'll come to that in a minute. I can't remember if they're Partisan or not, but they offer already analyzed data. So they've collected a lot of data and then from that analyze what they think people would be interested in. And there's a list, some of the things on the list that they have here, they can sell profiles on people who support or oppose immigration crackdowns, Black Lives Matter, transgender bathroom use, voting requirements, marijuana legislation, or the Me Too movement, as well as people's opinions on abortion, death penalty, gay marriage support, and gun laws. So they offer like this very broad range of types of profiles. And this is, again, I guess, bringing it back to the purpose of looking at this industry. It isn't the political party creating these profiles. It's the private firm collecting and creating these profiles. And so it's based very much on their values and what they think people need to know and what they think is worth collecting and how they collect it. The other one here is also Brandwatch in the bottom. Brandwatch use social media monitoring to help monitor emerging threats. So they look at, this is actually the example they give is private company example, but they also work for political parties. But the example they give on their website is how people using the term climate strike towards specific private firms could be tracked, and then they can then suggest how to get that outside of the public, the top of the public website. So for example, if it's on Twitter, they can see that that's trending and then quickly flood Twitter with something else about that company, or at least embrace that hashtag, but try and move it away from the private firm in question, or something similar to this. So that was data as intelligence. And now we're going to look at data as influence, which is this final area in which these private firms might work. And so, yeah, quickly, I think we've talked about influence throughout this, but influence as having a capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself. And so this part is about where you see the final message from the political party. And it comes back to that question at the start, like, where are you seeing it? Where do you see the colors that they're trying to put in front of you, the images, their face, their name? Like, where do you see their communications? And this could be on Facebook, campaign apps, search engine optimization, so through Google. It could be on WhatsApp, or through SMS, through Twitter, or through websites. And to give an example from search engine optimization that is a little bit old, but I think is very notable, was in Kenya. They had an election in 2017 with Raila Odinga versus Uhuru for Us. And Uhuru for Us, they worked with a consultant who will actually have a quick look at, called Harris Media, who have worked in generally only right-wing campaigns in different countries in the world. And they created like a negative campaign website called The Real Raila against Raila Odinga. So if you search the word scandal while you're in Kenya, and I mean, search results do change for everyone, but if you looked up the word scandal, they had paid Google AdWords that the top result would be the advert for the website, The Real Raila, 12 Reasons to Not Trust Raila. Again, if you also searched Unga price, they had paid AdWords on Google AdWords, so that the top advert would be to an article describing how Uhuru had lowered Unga, which is a type of maize, price for. And so this was like also a key election issue. So this is ways that search engine optimization, and one of the purposes of talking about this is also like as this reminder that it's beyond Facebook and Twitter, that this where we see it is a much bigger question than just platforms. Another example is campaign apps, and we have done some investigation into campaign apps by working with technical experts who examined the source code and the code behind the campaign app, which I can share a link to that research. And this is UCampaign. This map is actually from UCampaign's website. They've created campaign apps for Donald Trump, for actually also for the NRA gun group in the US, but they've also created a campaign app for I've forgotten his name, but the president of the Dominican Republic from a few years ago, Danilo, yeah. And also for the Brexit campaign in the UK, and then also for every other country that they've listed on their website here. And then the obvious spaces are also Facebook and Twitter, and I just also mention them because they still remain very important, and Facebook advertising is still a large area of spending. It's also one of the only areas we can review spending because of the Facebook ad library. And so I won't go through this here, but I left this in the slides for anyone who wants to also do more homework to have a look at the ad library on Facebook and to go through a few questions to help you see how quick it is you can use it and how much you can learn from the Facebook ad library. So I'm going to come back to the question of how we investigated the industries. So I had initially had these few companies that did slightly different roles, like looking at data as asset, intelligence, and influence, and to look at 8 or 9 of these companies that fall into these different categories. And as we were doing it, I think initially we had 8 companies, then we had 20, then we had 40, then we had 50, and very quickly I couldn't keep up with how much research we needed to do. And in this case, what we did was change our question from, like, can we create a dossier on each of these companies to can we just publish and maintain a list of all the companies in this industry? And so to do this, we changed our tactics a little bit. And so instead of just like going deep dive into their materials, we kept up like information that we were getting through word of mouth and public sources. But we also started on step 3 and 4. So we looked at political and campaign lists and directories and awards, such as Campaign and Elections, who host, they used to have a consultant directory. They've now actually taken it down, but Web Archive is every researcher's friend in this space, definitely. So you can find lots about the different companies they listed and who worked with campaigns. But we also looked at databases. that already exist. So we looked at company databases, but particularly we looked at two spending databases. One is the Electoral Commission in the UK, and the other one is the FEC, Federal Electoral Commission's spending database in the US. And from this, we could look at all of them that fell into the category of advertising, or also some of them quite explicitly say they work on website services. There's a few different ways we filtered the data from these spending databases. And so what they show is what money political parties spent during an election and which companies they spent it on. And from this, we gathered this, like as many of the companies we could find that covered the theme of they work with a political party because they're found in these lists, and they must do some type of personal data-driven work or work with technology in some way. And so from doing that, we reached a list of 500 companies. And again, at this point, we decided that we could no longer keep up with our initial question, or now our second question being, can we keep a list and maintain a list of all 500 companies? But now we have a list of 500 of all the companies working in this space completely. And now we wanted to move back to, we have a list of 500. We see this as a good sample size. Now we have a good sample size. Can we return to like that first question? Who are they? What are they doing? What more could we know about them? And what concerns should we have about them? And that phase started, maybe 6 months ago. So we're just in this phase now of like, what do we want to know more about these companies? And so I will just make sure I don't have too much more here. I will move to this one then. So we have published it here, so I can share this link in the chat. And but I will open it here so that you can have a look at it here. So now we've published this list of 500 companies, and that's 500. There might be 502 now, 503. We're slowly adding a few more. And now we're asking a couple of questions. So like, what can we know with this data? What type of information can we collect across all these companies that could help us understand more, and what could help other researchers investigating this space? One of the things that we're particularly keen to do, and we've got a call for at the moment for people to help us do this, which is to add companies that are from, because these three things I just showed you we used as like mass data imports from the UK and US spending databases, and also from the campaign and elections directory. All three of those things are US or UK, and we'd really like to keep this an international resource. And so we do have information on companies working in India. I think of a few more that we might have a few working in, but it's not substantial compared to if we look at United Kingdom, which we have, at least 300 of the companies or 250 of the companies. Some of the other things, we have actually appended the spending databases. I think the UK one is most up to date. So this firm called, and if you can click on firms here, you can click on firms here. This firm, McLay and Company Limited, we can see down here, there's a little bit of information about them, but you can see down here that they have made 345,000 from UK political parties, and just the next step of our research is to add which parties. At the moment, we just have which country. Another one which I think is particularly interesting, also from the side of ethics, is Crosby Textor. Crosby Textor, we found from their primary source, from their website, to be working in the UK, Australia, Italy, and United Arab Emirates. From a secondary source, from other people's research, we found them to be working in Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Zimbabwe, Sri Lanka, and Yemen. And then we also found them in the UK Electoral Commission's finance database to have earned £8 million from UK political parties. I'm going to just think of a couple of others that I think are nice to show. I think actually, I'm going to show one that's really tiny, 123 Form Builder, because I think one of the things I really wanted to show with doing this website, 123 Form Builder have made £12 from the UK and $413 from the US, and they are very much a company helping political parties collect personal data, but most of the data is held by the political party, not by 123 Form Builder. And they are small, but they're still, I think the fact that as a company compared to Crosby Textor, who we just looked at, 123 Form Builder show that it's such an industry. Like it's a sign of this space being that I think people often want to ask questions about the biggest companies earning the most money. But for me, what was important was to show that this space is an industry. And that means that there's space for small companies. It means there's space for companies who start up under a new name and close down and then have a new space. I'm trying to see if I can remember one. There's a few here where they've shut down one company and then started a new one with a different name some years later. And also the fact that if any one of these companies disappears, another company might appear, or it might be used, or another one set up. Like it's ever evolving and changing. And it also, as an industry, has space for this like dark side that I discussed at the start of people performing who are now becoming also much more in the public eye of like people who create bot farms or troll farms, or who sell data from leaks, or who help support leaks and hacks of personal data in political campaigns. I thought I was a slightly out of order, but coming just back to Crosby Textor, I wanted to just, because at the start, Katja mentioned that, again, like maybe holding these two as a difference, but Katja mentioned that it's no longer just fluffy cats, but also sometimes other types of content that get the most reach on platforms around political influence. And it made me think of a somewhat dark story from Crosby Textor. So Crosby Textor have been shown to work with, firstly, there's two things that they have. So Crosby Textor have had, for one news article was written on them, which showed that they have a disinformation team, and the disinformation team specifically create disinformation, and they all have to go under anonymous names on all of their Slack channels and their internal channels, because it's seen as so risky a type of work they're doing. Again, this being like a really large firm working internationally, renowned enough. And also they were found with the Boris Johnson campaign in the UK to talk about the dead cat theory, which is that in a communications, when you want to have good communications as a political party, but you're currently receiving a lot of bad press, if you throw a dead cat into the middle of the table, no one will pay attention to the bad press that was about you. And so Crosby Textor, I think, are the symbol of fluffy, cute kittens no longer being the center of our of the attention of political influence content. And again, I think, yeah, comparing this to companies like 123 Form Builder, who are just providing a simple service of something for the parties to collect some information from their members. I think that these two examples help show also some diversity in what we might consider the ethical bads and goods of the influence industry. It's not so simple to say some are some are ethical and some aren't, or like they all are. It's very hard to find out even our own ethics. And I think my questions at the moment are very much, what would help me decide which one of these companies I would recommend to a political party or not? And one of the other angles of that I think is particularly interesting, which I touched on a little before, is some of them are partisan and some of them aren't. So 270 Strategies and Harris Media are both partisan companies who then you could say that it's good because they don't share any data across party lines. They don't use data that's perhaps collected for one reason for a completely different political reason. But Nation Builder were very well known in the space of data analysis and data hosting, to say that they weren't going to work on partisanship, that they wanted to work on non-partisan lines because everyone deserves access to data as long as they can afford it. So there's lots of different questions that can really create differences between these different companies. But the point is of them all being collected together is that wherever there's all these differences, they still all have something in common, which is that they support and play a role in how political parties can influence us. So I will leave it there. I realize it was a lot and all quite different things, but I was trying to give the most overview I could in this time. And so thank you very much. I'm very open to questions. I can also stop sharing the screen.